in front of me, and I know so many of you and how much leadership you've taken with projects in your communities. And what I'm going to say is, for most of you, probably not brand new, but let's think of it as a conversation where we all get to share our best thoughts and take this kind of pragmatically. You know, I think about what Ann's trying to do in Wheelock with their town hall, and what folks are trying to do with Baird in Pittsburgh, which is just fundamental to the future of that community. We're talking today not about broad engagement of people in all the different things that could happen in the community. We're starting today as though some of that work has happened, and that a team of people have come together who want to build a daycare center, or they want to build a gazebo on the green, or they want to build a children's playground, or they want to redevelop a derelict building in the downtown. And how do they start? How do they get organized? What are some of the fundamentals that they need to do to be successful? And mostly we're going to be talking about fundraising and solicitation. And again, I don't consider myself a great expert on this work. It's something you learn. It becomes sort of, as you're doing community and economic development, part of the fluid reality of getting things done. But one of the things that we know is that you can spend years planning for a project. And sometimes these projects can be really daunting. And it's really important to choose something that you can get done in a shorter period of time sometimes. Like, you want to beautify and transform your downtown. Well, choose something like putting up banners and painting park benches that is doable, that you can frame up with a budget that's not impossible, and that you can knock down the nuts and bolts of that budget and turn to a fundraising campaign and knock that project forward. And in doing so, you build relationships with other folks. You also build a sense of momentum in a community, and a sense of, oh, these are guys who actually are doing things. Look at how this project has moved forward. I know this is part of the larger effort that they're going to do. And gosh, I kind of feel like I'm a partner in that now, because I made a $25 contribution. So when you think about fundraising, but one of the most interesting things to me is, it's not about begging for money. It's not about having a handout because you want something for yourself. It's really an opportunity to engage other people in sharing, in leading, in sort of the hopeful work for the next generation of your community. So you're never begging, and you're never either talking down to someone who should give to you, or desperately solicited to someone as though they're better than you. It's really a conversation between equals who you're giving an opportunity to do something great. So you should never be shy about it. And I'm an introvert myself, and I've learned, God, what a richness there is in the different kinds of people out there in your community. And what a richness it is to go beyond differences and bring people together in a mutual effort, like raising the funds to get a project done. So I want to just start with, some of the diversity of projects. And, you may be working on a playground, you may be working on a daycare center, a park pavilion, whatever it is, there's some sort of nuts and bolts to what you might want to be doing for work as you go. A lot of this is in this community leadership guide. You all should have one. If you don't, and you send John an email, we can mail you one. But you're really looking at getting something done and moving something forward. You've got something that's a bit of a spear point that's going to be a visible, positive thing for your community. So you need to build a plan to get started. And you don't want to just be building the perfect plan and spending 5 years developing the plan. You want to build the plan and get going towards implementation in relatively short order. One of the first things is to begin to scope out. There's obviously a lot of different levels, from redoing Depot Square, which is a multi-million-dollar project in St. Johnsbury, or developing a pavilion like they did in downtown Hardwick at Atkins Field, which is pretty clear, pretty simple project. And when you get started in doing this, you also need to say, is this something that a single grant from USDA could cover? Or is this something that really needs community buy-in and participation? So you develop a strategy towards developing a project that is realistic based on potentials like that. But first you need to kind of come together around your budget. So let's start with the idea of something like a playground, where you basically build out an expense side and an income side, and you say, well, the expenses, we're going to need to do some excavation. We're going to need gravel. We're going to need to contract with that company that sells the plastic slides, the plastic gears, all the different parts to this thing. And you come to figures for what fits with your team and what fits with your community and the site that you've got. You may need carpentry help. You may need to have some paid labor, but you may also be able to say, boy, I think we can get 200 hours of community time from different people in our town participating in moving this. We may buy a load of gravel, but we may engage a lot of people shoveling that gravel around. We may engage the high school students in helping to drive this work forward. We may get some senior carpenters in town to volunteer and oversee work that a lot of amateur folks could get engaged in and help pull this project together. So that you're able to document, if you generally document hours, you can basically call for the in-kind labor of the community that if in the case that you have grants, you may need as balance. You may also want to buy trees, bushes, seeds. You may have be putting in grass. So you kind of lay that out and you come to what's the number that you're going to need. And that number, say you have a goal of $40,000 to build this playground. That number becomes your goal, and you've got a team hopefully that's geared up working with you on this particular goal. And as you're working, you may say, gosh, we really should have one of the carpenters on our inner team to help us plan and get this right. Or we want to make sure we're staying in touch with the recreation department or the town government. So let's make sure we have one of those people on our team. So as you're going, you think strategically about who needs to be there on the team. And when you're working to develop the project, you're really starting with an expense budget and your inner circle of the team. But to be successful in most projects, you're going from that, think of your community as a series of circles that start with you and your team. Say you've got 5 people working with you and you're working on that playground. What's the next circle of people that surrounds you? The second circle around your inner circle of the team may be all the parents in the community that care about that. It may be the school principal and a couple of the teachers who are particularly interested. It may be some of those carpenters and other people who want to see the progress of the community. It may be just good-spirited people who are already partly bought in. And so when you think about that second circle, you've got people who are ready to be close partners in this, but they don't necessarily need to be engaged in the planning and day-to-day work at your first table. And then beyond that, you may have children, you may have the larger community of the school, you may have all the parents in the community and other people who care about the children of the community, and ultimately the whole town can be part of that surrounding circle. So when you're doing fundraising, you've got a $40,000 goal. The first place you want to start is with yourselves. And if you're chairing the committee, it's really great if you say, I'm going to make a contribution of $200 to this because I want to get it started. How about everybody else on the committee? If we all chipped in a little bit to show that we're committed and we're on the line. And by making a donation yourself, you're saying this isn't an abstract thing and it's not something we expect someone to do for us. I'm part of it. I care. I'm putting my treasure on the line too. And as a solicitor later, the fact that you gave is really powerful. When you have a board of people who give, you're able to, you have a board of people who can just say to their peers or their friends, you know, I gave $500. I hope you will too, Bob. You know, that whole attitude is, it's like you're building a peer network of people who care, and you're starting with yourselves and you're making commitment and dedication at the beginning of the process. So you've got 6 or 7 people in the middle that have made contributions. When you think about your next circles and you think about the $40,000, you may be thinking, well, we could get the whole town to be coming to a bake sale at the school, and that could be one of our ways of reaching into the next circle. We could be having a raffle. We could be doing any number of things, but we could also be doing some solicitation. We could be asking people to, even children, to leave money in a jar at the grocery store or in the library at the school, or we could be directly approaching people who have resources. So when you're doing fundraising, one of the first questions is, who really cares? You've got your idea of the circles in your community, and as you build the project and go forward with fundraising, you want to bring people from the outside of the circle, especially people on the way outside who don't even know about it, in closer to the center. So you want to communicate about it. You want to do an early flyer that goes home with kids from the school that describes what your project is and lets people know that you've got a $40,000 fundraising goal and you're starting to work on it. You may even get a couple of people send you checks because they want to encourage that effort, but you kind of get a start. And then you think, when I think about people in my community who would care about the playground and could contribute to the playground, who are the people who really spring to mind that also could be leaders in this? And maybe they don't want to be on the committee, but they could be donors. You also have the ability to say, of all the different materials that we need, the gravel, the paint, the wood, are there businesses in town that would care enough about this project that they might make a contribution of some part of that so that they'd get recognition, and it would be good for their businesses because the people in town would like them and would like that they're making a contribution, they're part of this, that we could talk to early on. The second kind of thing that you want to think about is when you're designing any project, whether it's redeveloping a big derelict building or it's something fairly small, one of the most efficient things you want to do is have something of a donor pyramid. So if you think about a triangle, you think about, if I needed to raise $40,000, how much is going to come from small gifts from all the bake sales and the children and so forth, and maybe donations of $25 from community members? How much is going to come from the middle ground, maybe a number of different parents making $100 checks? And then how much is going to come from the top of the pyramid? So often you might see a pyramid that has 2 lines going through it. So there's actually 3 segments of that pyramid. You may have 5 segments if you're doing a really big long-term job. But the segments show you, if they're equivalent levels, you may need 50 donors giving you $100. You may need 5 donors giving you $1,000 or $5,000. And you may know that there's 1 donor who could cover 1/3 of the project, who could give you $10,000 to $15,000. And as you think about your community, let's face it, not everyone is equal in terms of their ability to give. And for some people, giving $10,000 to $20,000 is like some of us giving $100 to a cause. So as you look at your community and you look at your project, you say, is there a lead individual in our community? Is there a bank, an insurance company? Is there a business that's remarkably prosperous and would get this and would like the visibility of being the lead donor in this process? And oftentimes, when people are doing capital campaigns, they don't even start talking to the full public until they've had some conversations with a couple of key individuals. And they bring those people into the process early, and they try to get half the money pledged before they're even going out looking for those $100 gifts. So in your pyramid for your playground, you may find there's a senior citizen who's always been dedicated to recreation in the community. And you go see him and you sit down and you say, so we've got this goal. We're hoping that you could kick this off and be the leader for the future of our community playground at the school. And we're hoping that you could give us $15,000. And so soliciting funds for something like this, there's a couple of key things that I like to think about. And one of them is I feel it's a little bit like hitchhiking. And I know younger folks don't hitchhike, but when I was a young guy, I hitchhiked across the country. And there was some tricks to it. One of the most fundamental tricks is attitude. It's having this positive attitude. So you've got your thumb out there in the wind and trucks are going by you and it's dusty and it's hot. But if you show the dust and the heat and a negative perspective, if you have a negative feeling about a car that goes by you, that's going to reflect in your heart, and it's going to reflect in the way you look to the next car, right? So you always want to be positive, and you have to respect your donor really deeply as a human being, that you're not trying to build a transaction to take something from this person. You're giving them an opportunity for immortality. You're saying to this person, you're important. Yeah, you've got $15,000 or you've got $25,000. You're important, I respect you, and here's an opportunity for you to do something good, something bigger than you might do with that money if you just spent it on yourself or if you just left it in your portfolio to earn more interest. Here's something you can do that contributes to those children, to the future of our community. It's a little piece of immortality. You are doing that person a favor. And oftentimes donors, when they make a gift to an organization or to an individual, they thank you. The first thing they say is, yeah, but you're doing the work, and I really appreciate that. It's actually easier for people who have discretionary dollars to give money than it is to do the kind of work that you're doing to pull this playground together, right? So never be shy, never feel negative. And if that person says, you know, my priority is dog parks, and I like the playground thing, but I'm more into dog parks. I'll tell you, having a judgment that says their idea of dog parks is a bad thing and it's not important. And when you start judging other people as you're fundraising, you become like, it's not good for you and it's not good for your process of gathering resources. So be a bit above it, a bit zen about it, and it really pays off. So along the lines of all that, when you're soliciting funds, people give to people. And when you think about that campaign, people give to people directly. So there's a couple of tricks to doing this kind of work. It's often like you've got a small committee that's working on it and you recognize that you want to ask someone for that $10,000 gift. You say to yourself, who on our committee would be the best person to talk to that person? And should it be one of us or should it be two of us? Is it got to be intimate or should it be a little bit larger discussion? Is one of the people on our committee their friend? It's often easier for people who have money to talk to other people who have money and ask them than it is for people who are nervous about that. Because people who have money, they see themselves as peers. And often you can work with one person who has significant resources and they will do a challenge to their friends to support a project. But when you think about your inner circle, who's the right person to either go with you to do a solicitation or potentially do it themselves? Or is there someone else in the community that you'd like to bring with you who's a stateswoman of the community that has natural respect from people? Or is there someone who's a young mother or a young working person who's really engaged in this, who's got a lot of passion that they could bring into that conversation? And a part of the trick in doing a major solicitation, and I know I'm throwing in a lot of different pieces of this work, but bear with me, and I look forward to hearing from folks about what works for you. But one of the things that I learned early on, and it was like an awkward thing for me to learn, is that when you ask for money, you say to that person, Julie, you're super important in this town. We respect all your leadership and all the good work that you've done for different projects in town. And here's another one. This playground is really crucial for us to go to the next level with recreation for our kids here. And we know that you're capable of being a leader, and we really hope that you can consider a $10,000 gift to really kick this off. And then you have to be quiet. It's the first thing you want to do after you say $10,000 is you want to be polite, and you want to keep talking. You want to say, I know that's a lot of money, and I know it's hard, and you may have other priorities. You want to just stop. Because when you stop, then they own it. They own the ball. And they have to determine if they own this playground, if they are going to be partner in this deal. And when they have to wrestle with that, they start to reflect. There's an old saying that in the fundraising world where they say, you want advice, ask for money. You want money, ask for advice. Sometimes you go into a meeting where you're going to see that potential lead donor, and you're asking them for their advice for who might be able to give you that money. And oftentimes that leads to a second step where they'll list a couple of their friends, but they'll also say, yeah, and I would be part of it too. And then you hold off, you wait, and you go back for another meeting. Fundraising, there's this kind of there's the little trick of waiting after you ask. And then one of the other tricks is, and I don't mean to put it in a negative way, but they say for every time that you meet with the donor around a particular project or donation, you add a 0 to what you're asking for. And that's not really true, but what is true is that every level of contact you have deepens the relationship and deepens the potential commitment. And that's true even for your outer circle folks that you're not trying to bring in as big donors or big leaders. You think about the percentage response you get when you tweet, when you send out an email, when you send a paper letter to someone's home, when you do a phone-a-thon, when you take someone out to lunch. So when you're tweeting and doing Facebook posts, you're going to get less than 0.5% response of people who are going to make a donation in the general world. When you go to the level of a paper letter that goes to people's homes, you may get 1 to 2% response. If you send a letter to people who've given to you before with a personal note on it, you may get 15, 20%. You call those people, you may get 30%. You call someone and you take them to lunch and you say, you're super important to us. I want to give you a briefing on everything we've been doing. Your support is incredibly important. We see you as a full partner in our efforts. Thank you. And we hope that you can give us $1,000 again this year, or we hope that you can help us with the Community Leadership Network project and give us $5,000 to anchor this effort for the future. You build relationships and people care about the work and they want to do more, and they want to be important in fostering a sense of direction in terms of those efforts. So this, the bottom line is think about what you're asking, grade to the kind of person. The other point of this, the whole integrity and respect around fundraising. If you're doing this work on the fast and loose and you're not respecting your donors, if you don't have that attitude that, someone doesn't give to me, I understand, and there's all kinds of other priorities in the world, and I respect the decisions of people. I value them as people first, not just as potential hooks that I can get dollars from. That's really important. The other part of integrity in this work is that you never use a dollar that was raised for one purpose for something else. Your integrity and your commitment to that donor is that their money is like contributing to this vision, this thing that's bigger, and there's something sacred about that transaction. It's not like buying something, it's like being a partner. So you always need to use the resource for just what you've asked for, and you also want to respect that $10,000 donor in the same way you respect the $25 donor. You know, part of the value of the pyramid is the pyramid can help you move fast. And it may be that there's 2 or 3 people in the top half of the pyramid that really give you confidence of success, the ability to go out to the public and say, hey, we've already raised half the money. We're on the way. You know, people do those barometers or thermometers of, you know, have that in the park next to the place you're going to build your playground or whatever. Those are effective because it instills confidence. And fundraising is all about what Ted Brady at the Agency of Commerce calls relentless optimism, that we can do it. And one of those things that is so important as a chairperson or a person who's pulling together that inner circle is to turn to your peers and say, boy, I look at you guys and I say, I know we can get this done. So that you're constantly building confidence and the sense of importance of everyone at the table. You're also doing that with your donors. So you've got half the money raised in pledges and you're going to the community and you say, we're really going to need, you know, to reach our $40,000 goal, we really are going to need 100 people to give us $100 each. And you can take time as a team to say, well, who may be those 100 people? We can blast this out to anyone in the community and maybe we'll get a bunch of hundreds. But again, it's sort of that depersonalization thing. People, you send out that letter and you get 2% of people sending you $100. But if you sit with your team and respectfully say, who do you think in this town would be a good person to give us $100? Well, the hardware store could probably do it. They're going to be selling us some of the stuff. The store downtown next to the playground will probably care about this. Maybe we could ask the principal of the school to make a personal gift. Maybe these 3 parents, they're pretty well off. They probably could do it. And so as a team, very respectfully, you can build a list of people that you think are natural partners or people who are in that second circle, but you could be inviting personally one way or another. And one thing, if you've got 5 people on the team, you could be looking together at a list of 100 people that you've chosen out as potentially people to receive a letter. You may send the letter to everybody in town, to the full town checklist, but you may also say, let's call these folks and let's see if they would commit to one of us. And again, that people give to people. They don't give to causes and they don't give to problems. They don't give to the fact that kids have nothing to do or because kids are bored. They give because they see people working together for something new, something positive, something that excites them and will be a great benefit. So you're asking people as personally as you can, and you're moving up some people from just the letter to making the call, and you're dividing that work, and everyone takes on 7 or 8 names. And you may have someone else from outside your committee who's really personable or, you know, very extroverted and would like doing this. And you ask them to help call 7 or 8 people too. And essentially you get to where you have a call list and people take it on, and you, whoever's chairing this, holds everyone accountable so that everyone reports in what their calls did. And you have a sense of where you've accomplished. And so, you know, you build this sort of campaign, And you also have a sense that of timing, that let's all do our calls within the next week, so that you build a sense that this isn't something that's going to straggle for 6 months. We're not going to be doing fundraising forever, folks. The next stage is going to be, we're going to have the money and we're going to go out and we're going to start digging. So let's get the money together and let's do it in the next 2 weeks. And so let's call all these folks now that we've got our lead donor in, and let's knock this thing down. You may also need a grant. You may, depending on the complexity of your project, there may be other things you need to do too, but those are all starting points. The bottom line with all this is, when I started doing fundraising, I was terrified. I had no desire to go to the Rotary Club and talk about my project, or I had no desire to go to door. One of the first projects that I worked on was in Barrie, where we built an out-of-school youth center. And we went to a couple of senior citizens in the region, and we said, we need someone who will pay the rent for this place. And we went to IBM and we said, we need 20 new state-of-the-art computers. And we basically broke it all out, and we went to people who would care and would have different kinds and different levels of resources to pull off something really new and vital for that community. And when you think about the partnership and the momentum that comes from people working together, everyone who comes to dig at the playground feels like they own that soil. It's like their place. Every child who comes with their parents and picnics that day while their parents are working feels something. It's like this tremendous power of community, and the commitment of physical labor, the commitment of dollars, the commitment of energy, vision, and so forth. It can happen at the smallest level, and it can be a tip for a sense of progress, a sense of community, that we're in it together, that we're going to make progress, that we're going to build a better future. And that is priceless, right? Especially in the time we live right now. We're making progress is priceless, and it sets a feeling of momentum that crosses the lines for people in your community. So never be shy about taking it on, and never be shy to ask for money to drive things forward that are for the collective good of your community. That's my spiel, John. I'll turn the floor back to you. I hope I was in the right timing there, John.
I think you got the timing right on, Paul. And I have to say, there was, it's like panning for gold. There was a lot of nuggets right there for all of us in terms of how we do this effectively. And I'll just make a note that we record these and put them up on our website. So like for all of us, this is I would say this is one where some of us may want to go back and watch it again, actually, because there was a lot in there to take. I want to introduce someone else from our team to say a few words. We have a new member of our team at the Council on Rural Development, and she may be familiar to some of you folks. Alyssa Johnson comes to us by way of Revitalizing Waterbury, where she's been working for a few years now, and she's now at VCRD, our Community Projects Associate. And in that role, Alyssa, so much of our work as we do community visits and our Model Communities program and have conversations like this one is connecting with Vermonters who have ideas and projects that they're trying to make happen in their communities. And with Alyssa now on our team, we are sort of notching up our level of support that we can provide to some of these communities and partners who are trying to do these projects in terms of how to get it from an idea to implementation. So with that, let me just give Alyssa a chance to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to meet you all. Thank you for being here. I really like your analogy, John, of the nuggets of gold. I have people give to people in all caps. So I'm here listening and learning too. So thank you, Paul. And really, I think John summarized it well. I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with communities. I'll put my email in the chat. We're still working out what that will look like, but I encourage folks to reach out I think our team really wants to support all of these efforts. We know that they are driven by all of you, but if we can be a resource to help bounce ideas off, that's what we're here for. So thanks all.
That's great. Thanks, Alyssa. You know, at this point, I want to open it up to folks to ask some questions of Paul, ask some questions of one another, because like Paul said in his introductory remarks, there's a lot of expertise gathered in this Zoom room here, or maybe share some advice or suggestions. You know, one observation that I have from some of the work I've done in the past is that sometimes I see people going to events, like their go-to for raising money is to organize an event. And I think one observation I have about that is like really being shrewd about that decision about whether the effort and expense of organizing an event justifies sort of the return of organizing an event as a fundraising thing. Just like that sort of clear-eyed analysis of like, if you're going to organize a benefit music concert on the green or something like that, a meal or something. Now, sometimes there's a whole other set of benefits that come from that in terms of building community and raising awareness. So it's not always about the bottom line, but often I see people have these ideas of events and they end up spending a lot of effort and time. And all of a sudden the event is the focus as opposed to sort of whatever the project that they're raising money for. So that's one other further observation, but I want to open it up to you all. Other questions, thoughts, points to share? You can either do that in chat, use the raise hand function, give me a little wave, however you want to chime in. Deborah Grandquist.
So I have a sort of a question and a comment around the work done prior to the point where you get to what Paul was talking about. And, you know, some organizations, if they're going to have some project that's going to require fundraising, they just dive in and do it. Other organizations maybe reach out to the community to ask the community to help the community, to have the community help define the project. And so, for example, in our town in Weston, we're getting ready to hopefully expand our library, add a bathroom, which we don't have. And you know, we're grappling with that, particularly in the time of the pandemic, whether to have, what breadth to have of focus groups that would come together to talk about that project and what that project could mean for the community and what people would like to see in the project, et cetera. So I'm sort of reaching out to both Paul and others in terms of your experience or thoughts on how do you balance that, that sort of thing that the organization wants to do X, but you need, you need to reach out to the community to see if X is something that they actually really would support.
John, you want me to go first?
I do, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's a great question because everyone's in a different place with all kinds of projects and complexity beyond what I had to say. But when, you know, in the case of you're going to expand the library, one of the things you want to do before you ask for money is listen. You know, in any process, listening first, outreach that's open, that doesn't say, we have all the answers for what the future of the library should be, and you're not important in the decisions. Like for any kind of facilitation, knowing what you're asking and how you're respecting the people who come is really important. So you may be at a point where you're really just deciding, boy, the library is awful tight. Let's involve the whole community in visioning about the library. Or you may be and so you have those big vision sessions. You ask everyone to brainstorm all that they can, and maybe you even ask people to do some first prioritization of what's most important to them. And that helps the library board figure out, well, what does the community really care about, and how does what they say help us grow and be more successful for the future? Just doing that, everyone who contributes has a sense of ownership and participation. They're part of the movement for the library. They wouldn't have come to a meeting except that they care. And even people who come to criticize or have concerns about how much it's going to cost, that's all important to know, and it's important that they're there and they're sharing something that's important to the project, part of the reality, and they're part of the team, if you think about it big enough. So those kinds of sessions, there may be any number of levels of it. You may have 15 ideas as a board about future functions, everything from desks for business people to come and be able to work out of their homes to video projectors, whatever. And by asking people, what is most important to you as a community, and letting people actually have a hand in sharing non-binding, non-budgetary voting that help to the committee get the temperature and direction from the community. Super powerful. And everyone who participates, you've gathered their emails, you've gathered them into a circle, and you're going to be able to contact them again to say, well, here's the plan. We hope that you'll all be contributors, or that you've got a good start in terms of people's hearts being connected to the initiative direction.
Thank you. Other questions or reflections to share? And again, wave at me, use the raise hand function. Oh, I see Marty and then Ann after that.
So how do you, everything you said was, I took a lot of notes. It was really definitely nuggets of gold, but how do you take this concept, kind of the nuggets, the approach that you took for a $40,000 project, for kids, that's a park that engages the community, and apply it to a potentially $1 or $2 million project of renovating the systems in a health center? That's not exactly, it's just harder. I'm having a harder time thinking about the engagement of the community, because for that amount of money, I'm going to be looking more towards grants and loans and incentives and that type of thing. But I still think there has to be a capital campaign around it, because it's a multi-year project. How do you apply your concepts to that?
Great question, Marty. And I'm not in a position to judge your project, to think I know it all. But one of the things that strikes me from what you're saying is that your first question is, who cares about health centers and who cares about this kind of project? And ultimately everyone in the community does, but there are foundations which that's their whole job. There are federal resources where that's their whole job, is to help these things move forward. So part of your scoping exercise in terms of where dollars comes from, in some cases, the grant sources available to do a big project may obviate the need for any community donations. And that's not a terrible thing. It's much more efficient for you as a staff to approach. You can still have public engagement. You can still reach out to ask people both about their needs and concerns and hopes and visions, and encompass that in a way that helps tell your funders that this has got community buy-in. One of the things when we do our community visits, at the end of the process, we're working with Bennington, and expanding dental coverage to kids through the school is a high priority. That report can be attached to any grant that they send out that shows that the list of everyone in town who cares about this and came to a meeting and contributed ideas and what all their ideas were. It all adds this depth of a sense that the community is with you to your funders. Okay. On the other hand, there may be parts of what you're trying to do that don't fit into the federal grant guidelines, and you may need to select out for parts of the work that really do require engagement and local donations. And there may be significant donors who really care about the health system in the region and have great capacity and could be leaders for particular projects, but you may not need a full mobilization of the community. You know,
Okay.
I think it was Mary Evslin and her husband who built the new cancer center at UVM. Mark Foley in Rutland, you know, invested significantly in a cancer center. They named it after him. Senator Leahy found federal money for the Kellogg Hubbard Library. They named a wing after him. And that leadership became much bigger than just the tip of the pyramid. It became 90% of the project. And that there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great thing if you can pull it off. And
Thank
in
you.
your
Thanks,
case,
Paul.
sorry.
Anne, I want to give you a chance.
Thank you, John. We in Wheelock, we've done things, we kind of started with trying to create a series of events. We created the Wheelock Community Initiative. And our idea was to show what's possible. We can have things happen in our town. So we did that, and we got some grant support. And you know, we've continued on with some other successes. Many thanks to VCRD for our community visit program, which was a real, just a complete, you know, wonderful jumpstart project. So, but I think what's going on now is we have this sort of unwritten rule, don't solicit. And I think, so don't solicit individual donations. And I think where this comes from is it's the goal, the idea is to help avoid sort of a dichotomy in town. Yes, we're the people that have the resources that can help push something along versus the people who don't have resources, or someone perceives that they don't have the resources to be able to do this. So I'm just wondering what people's thoughts are on that in a, you know, especially for small rural towns in the poorest part of the state. And then there's just one other point, and this has to do with COVID. We did have one wonderful donor who preferred to remain anonymous. And we have gone back to that donor, and the response was, you know, don't ask us anymore. Here's a little bit to help with this one particular thing, but don't ask us anymore because it's COVID and we are devoting all our resources to basic needs. You know, you can't really argue with that because the basic needs are huge. So that's all. Thank you.
Paul, you want to share any sort of reactions or reflections?
I'm really sensitive to what you're saying, Anne, about the perceived, you know, us and them of wealth and people who may not have as much resource to contribute. You know, there's lots of ways towns deal with stuff like that, you know, with jars, like a jar in the grocery store that you can contribute a dime at a time to a park or whatever, so that any child can be part of the whole thing, or anyone who doesn't have lots of dollars. In some cases, there's an added political dimension, and I don't know if this is the case in Wheelock, where a building may be owned by the town, and some people say that's a town responsibility. We're already paying taxes. And in some cases, having donors come on top of, you know, like take a certain section, knowing that the municipality is also a partner and needs to be a contributor, can help make it easier on the municipality and the taxpayer, because some people are giving a little more. But I think, you know, the point you're making is really that you have to be sensitive to the reality on the ground for your community and its culture, and find ways to be inclusive in sharing the ownership for a new direction, or else you can have divisions form about it. So that's a really important point, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Steve, I see a hand up from you.
Yes. Thanks, John. Paul, when in a situation where you go to someone who you go in and ask for the town park, for a children's recreational area in the park, and they say, oh, dogs are really my thing, and I would like, if it was a dog park, I would consider it or whatever. What is your action then? Do you sort of, thank them and, blah, 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 and go away? Or do you see if there's a way to adjust the original plan to include a dog park?
That's a great question. I really like that question. I think it's really important to know the answer to that question before you go into the room as a team. My gut says it's a little bit like, as an organization, our organization could be watching the Federal Register, and as grant projects come out to do this or that for rural America, we could choose our direction based on those grant opportunities. And I think if you do that, you lose your soul. I think that you are following money rather than setting direction based on the core needs of your community. So, I think dog parks are perfectly legitimate, no problem. But if you're building a park for children and that person makes that decision, I think you just say, well, thanks. I appreciate that. I hope that you get your dog park at some point. But I think if you start to bend for people, and there's all kinds of people who want you to bend in all kinds of ways, then your committee loses a sense of momentum and direction, and it can have negative implications. On the other hand, there may be something that's an added feature where someone, instead of a dog park, they say, I'd like to build a little climbing tower, and you say, maybe we could consider that. So being pragmatic and flexible, but staying true to your principles and direction, I think, is important.
That's great. I see Alice has a hand up, but I want to just check in on our schedule. Some of you may have to go now that we're at 11 o'clock. Full permission, not that I need to grant it, for anyone who's got to hop off to go. I think let's take a couple more questions, because I feel like this is really helpful to hear some fielding of questions, and then we can get into some smaller groups. For those who want to stick around to some smaller groups, we find it's nice to shrink our size a little bit to sort of increase the depth of the conversation and get to know one another better. So with that, let me, Alice, if you want to ask your question or share something.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, Paul. My question is about overusing a donor, like going to the same donor over and over. And in this case, for the same type of fundraising. What I'm referring to is our Valley Housing Coalition that is now moving in the direction of funding and a housing trust. And the initial discussion has been different funding sources versus what one of the members called a one-stop shopping, that there's a donor there that has been very good to us, and the donor organization has a lot of money. And what a number of us are trying to guide the group towards is matching funds, multiple donors for what's going to be a rather large sum of operating money for housing projects. Mm-hmm. And part of that also is the community, and not over asking too much of taxpayers every year to help fund this particular initiative. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's really wise, Alice. It feels like any business wants to have a balanced portfolio. If you were investing in the stock market, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And for your income, if you have a single donor that's doing all the leadership, and their donor is going to die eventually. That donor could go away or change their interests. And and then you may not exist as an organization. So diversification of your portfolio means looking at that pyramid in general, and also your circle, and as an organization, you're trying to bring new people in. So the most obvious thing for me would be to sit down with that donor and say, who else do you know? Do you have peers that support housing at this level? Do you know other people who care? Maybe we could bring some of those people together and talk about how we could be working together better. Another idea would be to look at people who have given smaller gifts in the past, but who may have more capacity than you initially realized, so that you're asking people to grow with the organization and building a number of partners beyond that one individual who could step up when that person left. So it's like your relationships of bringing people into your circles and growing that pyramid over time is really fundamental to the success of a mission of a nonprofit. And it's a lot of work, and your executive directors, your development directors are doing it all the time, but you have to be constant with it to be successful as an organization. So sounds like you guys are doing some good work, Alice.
Yeah,
But
thanks,
I'm not
everybody.
the expert, so other people may just want to share an opinion. You don't necessarily have to ask me a question.
Yeah, is there anything else? Or also, I think some of us may be a little more comfortable bringing our voice forward in a little bit of a smaller group setting. So want to give one last chance to raise something with the full group. And then, I see Kevin's got a hand up. Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to share one tidbit about asking donors, and maybe it's more difficult during COVID times, but for that lunch or coffee, and just to front load that information that you are going to ask for a donation. So don't just like randomly bring them to lunch or coffee and then be like, hey, we were thinking about $5,000. Provide that on the front end. Like, I want to take you out and talk about these projects, and let you know about this upcoming one. Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, some like signaling of that as opposed to springing. That's helpful.
Sometimes it's like you go through the meeting and no one actually asked for money when you're planning to, because you're nervous, or there's two of you and you haven't decided in advance who's actually making the ask. But it seems silly, but it's really good to decide that. Like one person is like the color person and the other one's the announcer. Like, and one person's got the ball and is going to throw the ball at the end and say, "So Bill, we hope you can step up on this," or whatever it is. It's good just to think it out, and it's really fun actually to do it. It's amazing how warm those kind of lunches can be, and how much fun it can actually be to meet someone else and hear what they care about.
As we wrap up as the full group before going into breakouts, really want to thank Paul so much for this. Lots of pearls of wisdom, lots of valuable information there. So huge thank you to Paul for sharing.